cancer statistics specialist from University of California School of Medicine in Berkeley showed, based on all the statistical data accumulated, that the average life expectancy of an individual who goes through traditional therapies is 3.5 years. However, if you do nothing, it's 12 years. Pretty great success ratio, huh? This is their medical. Right now, the #1 cause of death is medical intervention. A book has been just released with nothing but documentation by Gary Null from New York. You can get it on Amazon. Basically, something like Deadly Medicine or whatever it is. Because #1 cause of death is still considered, nowadays it's cancer actually, and it's treatable with enzymes. #2 cause of death is considered cardiovascular. It's treatable with enzymes like and you can find all forms of cardiovascular diseases have been treated with enzyme saturation on the internet. I'm talking about not anecdotal, but actual clinical studies. And the third leading cause of death is basically medical intervention. And we're looking at around, due to either faulty application of medicine, misprescription, wrong dosage, unnecessary and deadly surgery, etc. Over 300,000 individuals die yearly from medical intervention. So we have basically a situation that in Herald Globe, Herald Tribune,
Miami Herald.
Miami Herald, thank you. In 1990, they had an article about, the problem in medicine, and a Harvard professor said at that point, he says, we are in a total mess. He says, we got to find out what we're doing wrong. And of course, that went unattended, and they're still doing the same thing that they've done wrong and making a lot of money and killing a lot of people. And I use these things without reservations, killing a lot of people for profit.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Yeah. The innocent doctors, who go through medical school and training, and they get a great training, and especially emergency medicine and helping individuals to get through automobile accidents, broken bones, and all kind of other things that might be occurring, and also doing emergency, but they can't do a darn thing for chronic diseases. And that is right now. Let's just look at the situation. If you go back to the days of the President Johnson, he thought he had a fantastic healing system in America, and he gave a speech on health of the nation. And in it, he read it for the first time, and he was totally shocked that 65% of Americans were sick with incurable diseases. 25% of our children at that time, were sick with incurable diseases. 85% of the elderly were under same medical care. And he said to the Surgeon General, he says, we got to find out why. And over 40 other countries had a healthier statistics, based on World Health Organization figures. So we got to find out what is going on. Why is it happening like that? Surgeon General spent with his team on limited budget close to 10 years. So that and it was by medical doctors, just to make sure that you don't miss the essentials. It was put right in the introductory chapter. He says, as far as health and wellness, do not expect any help from your doctors, from your hospitals, or any scientific breakthrough. The whole issue of health and wellness resides in 5 basic principles. Diet, exercise, your attitude. In other words, are you joyful, happy? Dr. Chopra said, if you're not happy, if you're unhappy with your job, unhappy with your mate, unhappy with your life, you're going to be soon enough dead. Unhappy people don't live long. Unless they take enzymes. So basically, so attitude and then environment and rest. Americans are about 3 hours behind on rest. And how are they getting around it? Well, there's all kind of drugs available. And studies done by University of Florida School of Department of Agriculture, with over 120,000 students involved. 60% of them who were attending school were anemic, inadequate oxygen. How can their brains function? How can they have vitality and strength? This is what we have in this culture. And even more so, what has happened now, recent statistic, 40% of our children are sick with old age diseases, and we're seeing that figure reflected at Hippocrates Health Institute. In terms of, instead of the mid-50s, now we're getting the mid-30-year-old kids with cancer, with Crohn's diseases, with diabetes, with rheumatism, with MS. And as I also showed, genetically they have changed, they have mutated due to the dietary practices that are advocated by our techno-agricultural complex. It's like the military complex.
Yeah.
And if you try opposing that, just remember when Oprah tried to say that she's giving up hamburgers, all of a sudden they came in with full guns blaring and had one of the biggest lawsuits going against her. Thank God, because of her deep pockets and having the right advice and everything, she managed to win the battle. But we're looking at a culture that is dissolving, dissipating, and statistics shows this generation, the parents will be outliving the children. Okay? That is, unless they change toward basically, like Weston Price, nutritional degeneration. He was a dentist, studied cultures. From one generation to the next, they produced basically pretty healthy individuals with fantastic bone, fantastic teeth. But as soon as they changed their eating patterns from whole food, they weren't raw, but it was whole foods at least. Right now, according to Mercola, 95% of the food eaten outside of a home, and most people eat outside, is made up partially or totally of processed foods. So the studies that was done by Pottinger, he showed on an enzyme-less diet, within one generation, the old age diseases appear now in mid-age, and within that generation that it's reproducing, it appears in the teenage years. And that's where we are right now culturally. That Pottinger experiment with cats was for real. It's now being totally duplicated within the human population by the lifestyle habits. A lot of people are choosing their own directions. There was a study by Dr. Roy, I believe Paul Ray, about, you can look it up on the internet, cultural creatives. And basically they divided the society into 3 different groups: traditionalists, moderns, and cultural creators. And they had about 20 values that are common. So if you participated in, let's say, at least, you know, like 10 of the values of that group, then you would have been counted in that group. Well, the number that belonged to the cultural creatives had dealt with things as respect for earth, respect for their body, nonviolence, environmental consciousness, spirituality, you know, being involved in raising children, their own children, and etc. Those values. They found at that time they had only about 20 million people in that group. Now it's over 100 million. basically, due to internet and the web, it has brought the alternatives where people, at one time, like I said, they used to pray to God. Now they Google their way to truth. And they make choices. Half of the people that come to Hippocrates have no damn idea about nutrition or health. But they were sick, they went to Google, they did the research, and Hippocrates, of all places, made the greatest deal of sense. So, we have a very, serious, very serious situation. And plagues is just around, a pandemic is around the corner. The protection for pandemics, wear garlic necklaces around your neck. But that, in case that doesn't work, sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is much better. And basically avoid negative by sharing sauerkraut. Have sauerkraut kitchens. Instead of vaccinations, they need sauerkraut. The doctors should be told that.
Yeah.
Or kimchi. And or both. Or Rejuvenac. You need more bacteria cultures to protect you against pathogenic cultures. And this has been already proven out very successfully. So, when the individuals at Hippocrates, they get into now, they're getting the wheatgrass, the removal, which is, like I said, it kills off cancer cells, they remove the causes, and also we put them on a very high enzyme saturation that boosts their immune system. Because what happens under normal dietary patterns, on the average, by the time you hit your 60s, you have lost about 80% of your enzymes in your body in comparison to a teenager. Don't you want to be a teenager enzymatically? And you can refurbish. You can refurbish those enzyme levels by just taking high dosages. In studies that were published and quoted in the book Enzymes, the Fountain of Life by the 3 MDs, they subjected animals to 100 times the recommended dosages. They saw no side effects outside of improved health, and the stool was little softer. That was about it. I consumed definitely 100 times the recommended dosage. I used to buy them in 50-pound drums. That was, I'm talking about 40 years ago. And then I would sell off half of it to feed my habit, and the other I would consume it myself, because I really saw the difference. And it built up to the level where I was at one time allergic to all kind of foods, including 21st century disease. I couldn't stay more than 8 hours in a city. I had to get out. I was feeling totally uncomfortable, getting all kind of fatigue, mental fog. So every day I worked at Hippocrates, that I co-founded with Ann Wigmore, and I would go back to the farm every night to get some fresh air, to kind of chill out, detoxify, and until I build up the enzymatic reserves. Now I can spend, I lived 2 years in New York City itself, in Chinatown, which is considered one of the more polluted areas of New York City. So basically, so we saturate the individuals with enzymes. We get them into physical fitness, into meditation. It's a holistic approach. We address, one of the first weeks you go down there, you see basically emotional counselor, and it helps you to get started on your emotional side, because as long as your attitude is wrong, you got a lot of judgment, lack of forgiveness, you also are into self-abuse mentally, you're just going to get the full benefit. Or you might get the full benefit and you leave Hippocrates, and you're going to, first chance you get, you're going to dive back into comfort foods because you're emotionally, mentally uncomfortable. So we see the importance of doing that. And we have had, some individuals do pass away. That included my wife. She passed away from cancer. Of question is why? You know, here I am. I should have been able to take care of it. She was a judgment person. She hated herself. She had anger toward others, judgment, because of all the abuse that she received. She and I, we were two examples of mirroring one another, and that's why we ended up finally getting together, two dysfunctional individuals. However, I had the advantage. I had long earlobes. She had no earlobes. She consumed tons of coffee to basically to subdue her. You know, it's like the #1 antidepressant that is unhealthy, but it does work. You feel much better. You get into mobility, you get into motion and all that kind of stuff. And basically, you know, her commentary to my stepson was, if it wasn't for Victor, basically I would have died a long time ago. But person has to get on and forgive. Forgive that mother, forgive that father, forgive the many men who abused her. I had a history where it was even worse than hers. I mean, my life was so shocking that I zipped up my youth. I have no memory of youth. I didn't start speaking till I was 17. I mean, and basically the hormones were raging, and I needed to learn how to communicate with the opposite sex. And you know, my level of communication at that time was, I went into Greek mythology, and I would memorize Ovid's love poems. I would recite them. That was, but it took a lot of effort to say a 4-word sentence. Often I had to memorize that. Basically, and to get out of that rut, I mean, I had bleeding ulcers by 17 also. Oh, wow. And that lasted for a long time. But to get out of that, and I, at the age of 40-something, went back to my parents, because I knew that unless I loved them unconditionally and forgave them, I would never have a life of any sort, and I would die soon enough from my abuses. Remember, I mentioned earlier, I was bulimic for 10 years. You eat and you vomit. You eat and you vomit. That's very deadly, damaging experience. And when you eat, you basically sedate yourself. You become unconscious and you feel good, and then when you throw up all that stuff, then you're functional. You have a cup of coffee, and the next thing you know, you're very functional. And until, you know, the coffee wears off and you're ready for another indulgence. And it almost killed me every time. It became eventually a struggle between life and death, because you didn't know whether you were going to be able to get all that stuff out of your system. And that stuff will rot and it will kill you. And I've been close to death many times over. But I went back and I lived with them for about 2 years. Wow. And that's how long it took basically to get over. I served my mother. My mother was working. When she came home, I used to give her massages, do her feet, prepare meals, got her on supplements. And my father eventually started also doing a little listening. These are minor interventions, but it helped them quite a bit. And I finally just saw that what they did for me and created a kind of environment, not only they and that whole Lithuania thing, but what it did, it pushed me into a certain direction. Like Gibran in his book, The Prophet, he says, your parents and the experience of the social context of your parents is like the arrow, like the bow that shoots an arrow in a certain direction. Well, it shot me in a certain direction. Basically, it shot me into becoming, you know, initially I got into engineering because it looked like fun. Nuclear physics looked like fun. Theoretical mathematics, you know, these were considered hard stuff, but I went into it because it was fun, but it was not me. And eventually, at 29, I left all of that to pursue a direction that this arrow was shot, and the arrow was, and the bow was all the sicknesses and diseases that was now becoming a life and death issue. Either I take on personal responsibility for my life, or die at the hands of medical doctors. And I went to a whole bunch of them. Nobody had any good theories or good explanations on what is going on with me. I lacked holistic lifestyles, no exercise, very poor eating habits, poor attitude, inadequate rest because of caffeination. I mean, 2-4 hours of sleep, and polluted environment, which I was very rich, but I had, like I said, those long earlobes, which meant I had a strong liver kidney that could detoxify and could hold me up. My wife didn't have that, so she fell apart, and basically, and she didn't want any kind of rescue. Did go over Hippocrates, but the decision, she came there quite late, and she just didn't care about doing all that kind of stuff. She says, I'd rather go, and I said, that's fine. We surrounded her for the 2 months that she was alive with many of her students and 2 very lovely angels, Catherine Clark and Terry Zuccanti, who looked after her around the clock, and basically at a hospice until she ascended, and basically another incarnation, she'll have it differently. I don't see death as a very traumatic thing. I look at death, question is, how difficult is birth and how difficult is death, or how joyful is birth and how joyful is death. And I see, as a very celebrative issue. I've done many eulogies, and I turn them into celebrations because it's nice to have someone die. Hopefully they were ready. Most people are not, and hopefully we are now living at a time, and Jesus never talked about incarnation. Instead, he taught physical immortality within the Essene tradition, is that stay around here as long as you need to until you fulfill your dharma, and then you leave behind a healthy young body. And in the Essene tradition, the Book of Jubilee states, a time will come when the children will once again study the laws of nature and follow the commandments, and there will be no more death, no more sickness, no more sadness, no more disease, and all shall live in children's bodies for thousands of years. That's where we're right now moving into, that level of awareness and consciousness and transformation. And diseases will disappear, healing and doctrine will disappear. You can heal yourself in the most dramatic ways. We have such powers. I broke